Welcome to another Combat Mission Black Sea video, guys. As you've probably guessed, I'm going to be fighting at night here. It's a semi-urban map. It looks like we're on the edge of a town somewhere, and I'm going to be playing as the Russians again, defending against the Americans. This is a quick battle, so the AI isn't going to be at its best. If you watched me playing Dueling Shashkas last time, you could see how the AI had a tailor-made plan, and it knew what units were going to go where and do what. Here, the scenario designer doesn't know what kind of units you're going to pick, so it has to come up with a kind of general purpose plan, and occasionally you get some crazy things happening, like your mortars start charging across a field towards the enemy. So to avoid that, I've picked the enemy force as well as my own force, and what I've done is I've clumped it together in some multi-purpose blocks. It's all mechanised infantry. All the artillery, the mortars are off map, so they're not going to be doing anything crazy. This does mean that I know what kind of force I'm up against here, which might seem a little bit unfair, but I think this is worth it to make the most out of the AI. And in any case, this kind of information is the kind of thing that can be picked up by reconnaissance before the battle, either from ground reconnaissance, from drones, aerial, from human intelligence, from people on the ground, civilians, whatever. And in any case, the actual forces involved are so horrendously unbalanced in the favour of the AI that I'm frankly going to be very surprised if I win whatsoever. So the enemy is going to be having about 2 companies worth of mounted mechanised infantry in Striker infantry fighting vehicles. I'm also going to have 2 companies of infantry, and even though it's 2 companies on 2 companies, the advantage lies with the AI so much simply because the Americans tend to have more men anyway. They have a lot of organic support in their companies. Each company has a UAV and some 120mm mortars on call. They have a huge technological advantage. Their infantry has much more advanced combination night vision and thermal goggles, which are either very scary or insanely cool, depending on which side of them you're on. They have a lot of heavy weapons mounted on the Strikers. They're a lot more mobile. If I put the enemy force up next to mine like this, you can see on the left you've got 1 company's worth of American mounted infantry there in the Strikers, and on the right you've got 1 company's worth of Russian dismounted infantry. And just the sheer volume of stuff the Americans have compared to the Russians isn't even funny. In terms of point value for the quick battle balancing, you can see on the right a Russian dismounted company like this is worth 1,200 points. 1 American platoon, of which there are 3, is worth 1,800. So this is by no means balanced whatsoever. I think overall the Russian force here that I have is worth about 4,000 points, something like that. The American one is worth 13,000. So in terms of points value and the kind of numbers and capability and quality that represents, I'm hugely outclassed here, which is going to make it a very interesting challenge. Now that that's out of the way, my rather pitiful, hopelessly doomed force is going to be a dismounted BTR battalion task force, which has been cut right down to 2 companies and some 120mm mortar batteries. The 2 broad types of Russian infantry organisation in the game are BMP and BTR, which are named after their respective vehicles they're supposed to be carried around in. All Russian infantry is supposed to be mechanised. The big difference is that BMP units have a lot of firepower in their vehicles, whereas BTR units, BTR is an 8-wheeled coffin with a machine gun on the top basically, and to make up for the lack of firepower they have a 4th or a weapons platoon which has some heavy weapons in it. So what I've got to play with is 2 companies. Each company is 3 platoons of infantry and 1 weapons platoon which has ATGMs and machine guns. After that, I've spent about the remaining 700-800 points on field fortifications, namely target reference points and foxholes, and then as many mines as I could get my hands on. Thinking about my plan, the big tactical problem I've got to deal with here is that the enemy has overwhelming firepower. He can see better in the dark, he has better communications, he can move faster, and he can choose where he wants to attack. This means that I can't fight a stand-up fight because I'll be destroyed, and it means that it'll be very difficult for me to be flexible because I don't have a lot of depth to work with. My forces are going to be slow and very vulnerable while they're moving around. So what I've decided to do is strong point my infantry, keep them in the buildings, ambush the enemy at close range as much as possible while trying to keep something between my troops and the enemy heavy weapons. What I want to do is maximise my chances and get a lot of short, sharp, one-sided firefights at point blank range where I get the drop on the enemy and his big advantages don't really matter. What I've done then is I've deployed one company in the left-hand residential area. That's going to be the big strong point. The other company is deployed around the edge as a screen, hopefully conduct some little ambushes, that kind of thing, keep the enemy on their toes. I'm not bothered about holding the right hand objective. I want to hold on to the left hand one and try and cause as many casualties as possible. For the strong point itself, I've got a whole company in there. The platoons are arranged in a rough triangle formation for all round defence. The individual squads are split down into their fire teams so they can spread out between floors and between buildings. As an example, this is the top left hand corner of the strong point. The enemy is likely going to be coming in like this, and my troops are set up here in the second row of houses so that they're not exposed to direct fire from outside the village. The enemy has two basic choices. He can send his infantry through the buildings and the gardens, in which case he's coming into my field of fire at very close range where I can get the drop on him, or he can try to come up the street with vehicles and infantry. Just like in the back gardens, I can engage him at very close range. He's going to be coming to my field of fire first, and because of the narrow angle of the street, it's going to be quite difficult for him to get some suppressive fire onto it from outside. On top of this, I have plenty of mines. The doors to all the houses on the outside edge of the strong point have anti-personnel mines in front of them, and the streets on the way in have mixed minefields with anti-personnel and anti-vehicle mine. To round it off, I have target reference points spread out around the edge of the strong point where I think the enemy is going to be advancing or massing, and that's going to let me bring down 120mm mortar fire quickly and effectively. I spread my ATGMs and MGs out to try and cover some choke points, to get enfilade fire down the edge of the strong point, or to cover the open ground around the strong point. Everyone is going to stay put where they are, keep their heads down from the word go, except for one platoon, which is going to push up into the woods on the far right. If they bump into the enemy, hopefully it'll give them a shock and they'll cause some casualties. If they don't find any enemy, they can sweep through the woods until they do. Hopefully that'll disrupt the enemy a little bit, throw a spanner in the works, make him a bit nervous. That's the plan then, guys. Comment, rate, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you guys would do. Stay tuned for part 2 when it all kicks off.